Unspoken truths, 7 hours in silence that transformed my life, must watch for change. It began with a crackle in the air, a sense of something lurking just beneath the surface. The night was dark and heavy, loaded with whispers and shadows that danced just out of sight. 8 strangers gathered in an isolated cabin, seemingly innocent but cloaked in an unsettling energy that thrummed like a live wire. They chose to become captives of silence, a challenge that promised to reveal deep truths. But no one could have predicted just how profoundly their lives would shift in those 7 hours. When the clock struck midnight, the first unseen spark ignited. A chill swept through the room, causing goosebumps to rise on their arms. The darkness felt thicker, almost tangible. As the hours crawled by, strange echoes bounced off the walls, twisted whispers almost forming words. One woman gasped, her breath hitching in her throat. She swore she heard a name being called, not just any name, but one that sent rivulets of ice down her spine. Then there were the flickering lights. Heavy shadows lurked in the corners, morphing into unsettling shapes. A sudden crash startled the group into reluctant conversations, stirring a tension so thick it tasted metallic on their tongues. This was no ordinary night. The silence was like a hovering monster, ready to pounce at any moment. Would these 8 face their demons or be consumed by them? As the clock ticked, pulses quickened. Tension built like a tight coil, promising release. Eyes darted nervously, glances filled with mixed terror and intrigue. A voice broke the haunted silence, trembling yet bold. What if we aren't alone here? Hey, before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon. And while you're there, smash that like button, it really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect. The clock struck 2 a.m. Shadows deepened and the air grew thick with dread. A window creaked open, the wind howling like a restless creature searching for a way in. The silence shattered, reverberating with gasps and murmurs. Each heartbeat echoed in those frozen moments, and then a scream. It pierced through the silence like a knife, freezing every soul in its tracks. Who or what had unleashed such terror? Eyes widened, breaths were held, and something shifted. A truth was out there, waiting to be discovered. But at what cost? Would they all survive the next 5 hours? The scream hung in the air like a ghost, chilling the blood of everyone present. For a heartbeat, every breath was stolen, all eyes darting toward the origin of the sound. A figure stood frozen in the doorway, face pale, eyes wide with horror. It was Matthew, the quiet one who, until now, barely spoke. The others hardly knew him, but the chilling dread swept over them like a flood. As he stepped inside, the door thudded shut behind him, locking in the fear that had spiraled into an almost tangible form. It's out there. He stammered, his voice trembling and raw. The words muddled together, but the meaning was clear. Something was lurking in the woods, something that defied explanation. The fragile threads of their shared silence snapped entirely, as all 8 began to speak at once, their voices overlapping like a chaotic symphony of terror. I knew this was a bad idea, cried Sarah, her voice breaking. We shouldn't have come here. Calm down. What did you see? Another voice shot back, but panic infused the air, drowning out reason. A heavy silence retook its hold as Matthew raised a shaking hand. There was a figure, a dark shape among the trees. It was watching and following me. The harsh reality of his confession crashed into them like a wave, slapping fear into their faces. The group fell into an uneasy hush. In the back of their minds, they wrestled with shadows of their own making. While the clock dragged towards 3 a.m., paranoia wrapped its fingers around them tighter. Every sound, the creak of the cabin, a snap of a twig outside, felt charged with malice. they huddled in a semicircle, hearts racing as shadows flicked across the walls, the flickering light bulbs pulsing like a heartbeat. Each glance exchanged was heavy, filled with unasked questions. Did they come here to seek solace from their nightmares or to confront a reality far worse? Each carried burdens. Would the silence or the shadows reveal them? Maybe it's a trick, whispered Jenna, eyes darting nervously to the window. What if someone is messing with us? It could just be a prank. Yeah, sure. And what if it's real? Piped up Seth, clenching his fists. He glanced frequently to Matthew, searching for any signs of clarity amidst the chaos. You actually saw something, you need to tell us what it looked like. The tension shifted, heavy with accusation. Matthew's eyes flickered around the group, fear striking deep twitches in his jaw. It just had this feeling. I didn't see any details. Just something dark, and it was moving. As the room held its breath, shooting glances to the door and windows, another chilling sensation crept in. A whispered voice, barely audible yet invasive, seemed to weave through their thoughts, saying things they feared could be true. What if we're not just facing our fears? Matthew added, his voice wavering. What if the silence isn't the only thing here? The clock ticked ominously closer to 3 a.m. Each second felt burdened with anticipation, each shadow seemed to pulse with a dark heartbeat of its own. The air stilled again. And then the lights flickered violently, plunging the cabin into an abyss of darkness. Thudded footsteps echoed, heavy, deliberate, closing in. What awaited them in that consuming night? Each flash of light revealed only deeper shadow. Something was definitely breathing, watching, waiting. As the fear escalated, the last thing anyone saw was movement, a spectral shape rushing toward them, engulfing the chilling silence. Would they uncover the truth hidden in darkness, or would fear consume them all whole? The cabin was swallowed by darkness, thick and suffocating. A cold sweat coated Matthew's forehead as the whispers of his imagination twisted the air around him. The others stood frozen, eyes wide, trying to pinpoint any sound that lingered beyond the moment. Footsteps grew louder, but each thud felt like a hammer to their hearts. Is it coming for us? Sarah's voice was a mere whisper, trembling with horror. The panic in her tone settled deep within their chests, squeezing tighter, as if the fear itself was trying to escape. Shoo! Seth hissed, peering into the void where the door had just been. We need to listen. His voice, steady in its urgency, was like an anchor for a ship caught in a storm. The group nodded, all junkyard dogs hoping for a scrap of sense. Thud. Thud. The rhythm echoed against their eardrums, a symphony of dread and anticipation. Suddenly, the lights flickered back to life, casting eerie shadows that danced chaotically around the cramped space. It took a moment for Matthew to process the flickering light. Nothing was out of place. Nothing except for the anxious faces staring back at him, reflecting the same turbulent fear he felt inside. Maybe it left, whispered Jenna, though her eyes betrayed an uncertainty. They all wanted to believe in the absurdity of hope. Then, without warning, the front door burst open, slamming against the wall. Wind howled and a chilling gust rushed in, whipping around them as if intent on dragging out their sanity. Get away from the door! Seth shouted, grabbing Matthew's arm and dragging him backward. The unsettling image of a shadow, distorted and menacing, crept into Matthew's mind, tearing a scream from his throat. Something's there. Someone cried, pointing into the swirling darkness. An unmistakable outline lingered just beyond the threshold, a figure, standing still, like a statue of despair. It wore a cloak of shadows, details ungraspable, as if the darkness itself had taken form. Every instinct screamed to run, but the group remained, paralyzed by fear. Stay together. Matthew finally found his voice, though it trembled with uncertainty. We need to get to the windows, check if we can see anything. Their breaths quickened, united by a primal instinct for survival but divided by the very essence of their fear. They navigated through the cabin, glancing desperately at every window. Outside, the thick forest loomed menacingly, branches like gnarled fingers reaching out, inviting them to dare a peek into its shadows. Just then, a flash of light illuminated the edges of the figure under the door's frame, a split second that felt eternal. Matthew caught a glimmer of eyes, piercing yet devoid of humanity. A chill ran down his spine as he recalled the dread he felt, the essence of the thing he glimpsed in the woods. "Do you think it knows we're in here?" Jenna gasped, her wide eyes darting nervously toward the darkened doorway. "What if it wants us?" "No way." Seth snapped back, fear morphing into anger. "Whatever it is, we can't let it get to us. It's not real, it can't be." Just as he spoke, the unmistakable sound of fingernails scraping against the wood echoed through the cabin, each scrape a sinister reminder of their vulnerability. Seth's bravado crumpled, reading the faces of his friends each moment, tethering them closer to panic. Then the scraping stopped. A new sound broke the air, quiet, yet deliberate footsteps padding across the floorboards. "What is happening?" Matthew's voice cracked as the group turned, shoulders brushing against each other, silently asking if anyone had any answers. The beams of uncertainty hovered like lightning rods, absorbing every ounce of bravery they had left. Outside, the wind shrieked again, battling with the voices of their conscience. Then, from the depth of the shadows, a sinister laughter arose, weaving through the air like an insidious vine. What truth would be uncovered when the dawn finally broke? Would they survive this night of horrors, or was their fate sealed beneath the weight of their unspoken fears? The laughter echoed, deep and mocking, swirling around the cabin like a malicious spirit. Matthew's heart raced as he tried to make sense of it, the dread coiling tighter in his chest. What was that?" he stammered, clutching at the window frame as if it might save him from the encroaching horror. Seth seized the moment, his bravado rising again, though it felt fragile. "We can't just stand here. We need to arm ourselves. There has to be something we can use." The urgency in his voice cut through the momentary paralysis. "Are you insane?" Jenna's voice quaked, her wide eyes reflecting panic. "There's no way we can fight whatever that is. It could be a person." Seth shot back, a desperate need for control lacing his words. "We'll just check the shed out back." "Are you really considering that?" Sarah interjected, shaking her head slowly, like a swimmer caught in turbulent waters. "You're going to put us out there in the dark?" Matthew felt the weight of the debate hang in the room. Anxiety drummed in his ears, drowning out their voices. He shot a glance at the door, still wide open, the outside night beckoning him like an ominous invitation. "Look, we can't hide forever," he urged, forcing the words out, feeling brave as if he were trying to convince himself. "Even if it is a person, we can't let fear dictate our survival." "I say we check then." Silence. It was like a sudden cut in a film. Everything froze and held its breath. They exchanged looks, minds racing with the implications of their choices. Every second lasted like an age. A rustle came from the darkness beyond the doorframe, a disturbance that sent everyone's heart stumbling. "Maybe it's gone," Jenna whispered, but even she seemed unsure. "Or waiting for us to make a move enough." Seth snapped, his voice slicing through the tension. "We need a plan. Not an argument. If we're going to survive this, we need to be ready." He pointed past the doorway, summoning the courage gathering in the air. Through trembling hands, Matthew motioned toward the back. "Then let us do it together. Let us stick to the light. If we get split up, what do you think is out there?" Sarah shouted, desperation tinging her voice. "An animal? Or that thing? We shouldn't even be near the door." "Too late," Seth grunted, moving before they could stop him. "I'm not just going to wait for it to come in here." And with that, he took a determined step toward the doorway. The shadows seemed to shift, moving closer, almost watching him. Matthew's stomach churned, a heavy knot tightening in his gut. "Stay behind me," Matthew whispered, clenching his fists as he positioned himself just behind Seth. As they moved cautiously toward the door, the laughter returned, now blending with faint whispers, gibbering, taunting, woven together like a sinister thread. The unseen figure seemed to loom larger in their minds, the very essence of their darkest fears. Together, Matthew reminded them, mantra-like, even as doubt flooded through him. With trembling hands, they edged their way past the threshold, stepping into a world that had transformed into a realm of nightmares. The moonlight barely pierced through the trees, leaving them in a murky film of shadows. Every crack of a twig beneath their feet felt amplified, a drum roll leading them to an unknown fate. "Can you hear it?" Jenna murmured, her face pale as she stood just behind Matthew, eyes darting to every rustle. Panic clawed at her throat. "Yes," Matthew nodded, glancing back at the cabin one last time. The structure crouched behind them, a hideaway stained with dread. He could almost see the shadows writhing within, waiting, hungry. But they had to move. They had to know. As they stepped away from the safety of the cabin, a sudden stillness enveloped them, as if the world held its breath. The sinister laughter faded, leaving only the whispering wind and one question that hung heavy in the air: what was lurking just beyond the edge of the tree line, ready to turn their fears into reality? Matthew's heart hammered as shadows shifted, uncertain of what might step forward. Only one thing was clear: the night was just beginning, and the worst was yet to come. The air was thick with tension as they huddled close, every rustle of leaves pushing the chill deeper into their bones. Matthew felt the pull of the shadows, drawing them in like moths to a flame. He wanted to reassure Jenna, to promise her that everything would be fine, but the certainty burned away in the pit of his stomach. Seth moved first, edging deeper into the darkness, the beam of his flashlight leading the charge like a spear. "Just stay close," he muttered, glancing back as if checking for reassurance. Matthew gulped, heart racing, and took a step forward. Jenna followed, her breath hot behind him, but he heard Sarah hesitating at the edge of the door. "What if it's not just a joke?" Sarah whispered, the words scraping against the quiet. "What if it really wants to hurt us?" "Then we'll face it together," Seth replied, though his voice lacked conviction. They shuffled through the underbrush, like trespassers in a haunted land, each crack of a branch echoing like a thunderclap in the dense night. The laughter had faded, but in its place lay an unsettling silence that felt heavier, more overwhelming. Matthew's mind swirled with possibilities, every step deeper into the woods feeding the darkness in his imagination. Jenna's grip on Matthew's sleeve tightened as they skated past a gnarled tree, its branches clawing at the sky like skeletal hands. "What if it's just some kids messing with us?" she said, but her voice quavered, betraying her fear. Her eyes darted around in panic, scanning the thinning beam of light for any sign of life. "Kids don't make that kind of noise," Sarah insisted, almost pleading with them to understand. That felt wrong. They paused as a new sound broke through, a soft rustle on their left, then another, as if something heavy was shifting through the undergrowth. The air turned frigid, a sense of predation suffocating them. Matthew's heart pounded in his chest, a relentless drumline keeping pace with the dread pooling in his stomach. "Did you hear that?" Matthew said, barely above a whisper. "Maybe it was a deer." Seth tried to sound brave, but the tremor in his voice suggested otherwise. "A deer doesn't laugh," Sarah snapped, frustration mixing with fear. The rustling grew closer, and the beam of Seth's flashlight flickered, nearly dimming before he steadied it. Matthew felt a surge of adrenaline, but dread clung to him like a second skin. He swallowed hard, each gulp a struggle against the lump in his throat. "Guys, we should go back," Jenna urged, her voice thin and trembling. The suggestion hung in the air like a bad omen, met with silence. But as if taunting them, the rustling stopped, replaced by an eerie stillness. The woods felt alive, as if all the animals held their breath, waiting for something more. Matthew's instincts screamed at him that they were no longer the hunters but the hunted. Before he could voice his concern, a shadow moved across the corner of his vision, darting behind a tree. And then came the laughter again, closer now, chilling and intimate, sending a wave of terror through him. "Run!" Seth shouted, the command exploding from him as he bolted back toward the cabin. Panic erupted. Matthew grabbed Jenna by the arm, the empty air between them no longer an option, and they tore after Seth. Each step pounded with urgency, fueled by the primal instinct to escape. They crashed through the brush, fear igniting their legs as they stumbled over roots and rocks, the laughter gleefully trailing behind them. The cabin loomed ahead, but as they neared, Matthew's heart dropped. The door swung shut, creaking ominously, and stood ominously ajar, a maw that promised shelter and possible doom. "Where's Seth?" Sarah gasped, her eyes wide in horror. Matthew's breath quickened, each cycle of air fraying his nerves further. He didn't know if Seth had made it back or if he was lost in the shadows. "This way!" Jenna hollered, yanking at Matthew's arm as she veered toward the closed door, but he hesitated, feeling every ounce of dread pulling him back. "Wait!" His voice felt small against the deafening silence that grew thicker. "What if it's waiting for us inside?" Just then, a guttural growl reverberated from the woods, enough to freeze them in place. The laughter was no longer just a haunting echo, it was a call to something lurking in the darkness, something that made every shadow feel like an enemy. "They couldn't stay here." As the growl deepened, clutching their hearts with icy claws, Matthew knew something was about to break through the veil of night, leaving them with a choice that would change everything. Would they face the darkness or run blindly into the cabin, hoping for shelter? One thing was clear. The night had only begun to awaken, and their choices seemed increasingly limited. What dark truths would they uncover in their desperate bid for survival? They took a breath, the cold air biting at their lungs, as tension hung like a fog around them. The growl rolled through the trees again, a deep rumble that sent vile shivers racing down Matthew's spine. Time hung suspended. "Jenna!" he hissed, pulling her close. "We need to decide now." Her eyes were wide, dark pools reflecting panic and uncertainty. "If we go in, we might be trapped. If we stay out here, we could be dead." She glanced back towards the woods. The laughter, menacing and intimate, surged again, a wave carrying a threat that slipped under their skin. "Just do it!" Sarah snapped, urgency cutting through her fear. She took a step toward the cabin, pushing past Matthew and Jenna, her resolve igniting something primal. "We can't stand here forever." "Wait!" Matthew shouted, instinctively reaching out for her arm, but she was already darting through the door, the shadows inside swallowing her whole. "Sarah!" Seth's voice sliced through the air, but it bounced back, unyielding. He was still out there somewhere, lost in that endless dark. The echo of her name faded, and with it, hope slipped from Matthew's grasp. They were left in the cold embrace of the night, its grip tightening. Finally, unable to linger any longer, he spun around and pulled Jenna into the cabin behind Sarah. Inside, the darkness felt thicker, the air stagnant and heavy. A shiver of dread snaked down Matthew's back. "We need to find Sarah," he whispered, his voice hoarse. "Where could she have gone?" Jenna asked, her voice quivering like a flickering candle. The beams of their flashlights danced off the walls, revealing dust and disarray but not a trace of Sarah. As they stepped further in, the door creaked behind them and swayed shut. The sound was resonant, final. Trapped. Panic gripped Matthew's heart again, harder this time. "Sarah!" he called, louder. "Maybe she just went upstairs," Jenna suggested, her eyes darting toward the dark staircase that spiraled into gloom. "It's the only option we have." Matthew stole a glance at the open door, the outside world retreating further into invisibility. The laughter still echoed faintly, mocking him. He clenched his jaw and nodded, trying to push down the tightness in his chest. They mounted the stairs, each step creaking underfoot, sound amplifying in the grim silence. "Stay close," he warned, but it was his own resolve he cast aside more than hers. They reached the first landing and peered into a dim corridor. Jenna's flashlight flickered, and for a brief moment, shadows deepened before she regained control. "Did you see that?" she gasped, pointing to a door at the end of the hall. "What?" Matthew squinted into the gloom, but it was just a door, slightly ajar. The air clung to them, thick with anticipation. That was when they heard it, the unmistakable sound of Sarah's voice. "Guys? Up here." Relief surged through Matthew, but it was immediately dashed by another growl. Closer this time. A pulse of fear ignited, electrifying every nerve. "Hurry!" he urged, taking off down the hallway, Jenna close on his heels. The door creaked open, revealing a room filled with darkness and shadows. Nausea churned in Matthew's stomach as he took a step inside. "Where are you?" he called again, the echo of his words swallowed by the thick air, and just then, they saw her standing at the far corner of the room. But something was wrong. Her body was rigid, head tilted, eyes wide and unseeing, as if she were threadbare, pulled between two worlds. "Sarah!" Jenna cried, reaching for her. But Matthew grabbed her wrist, a chill warning shooting through him. "No!" he hissed, stepping back. "Don't, Matthew, she needs us." But Sarah stood still, the shadows around her twisting and contorting. The laughter returned, sharper and more complex, almost circling them, breathing life into the shadows. A sudden crash made the floor tremble under their feet, dislodging something dark from the wall. The door slammed shut behind them, locking them in with whatever horror had claimed Sarah. "What do we do?" Jenna whimpered, her eyes wide with terror. Before Matthew could respond, the shadows lunged forward, a mass of swirling terror that promised to consume them whole. "Run!" he bellowed, breaking through the paralysis that threatened to engulf them. The moral fibers of his thoughts screamed to help Sarah, but primal fear thrust him forward into the fray of darkness, into the chaotic laughter that danced around him. Where would they run? Was there any escape from the monster hungry for them? The shadows crept closer, suffocating every light, and as he looked back, uncertainty gnawed at his soul. Would they save Sarah from the darkness or be swallowed by the very thing they feared? The clock was ticking, and the unseen menace was stirring, ready to exploit their every hesitation. What unspeakable horror awaited them as they stumbled deeper into the blackness? Matthew's heart pounded as he lunged down the corridor, Jenna's trembling hand gripping his. The laughter echoed behind them, taunting, unfurling like smoke, wrapping its chilling fingers around their minds. Each step felt weighed down by a thick, unseen force, like gravity itself had turned against them. "We can't keep running," Jenna gasped between breaths, her voice a fragile whisper against the encroaching darkness. "We have to help Sarah." "Not like this," Matthew shouted back, panic clawing at him. He couldn't shake the fear that if they hesitated, it would be the last move they'd ever make. The corridor seemed to stretch infinitely, shadows swirling around them as if the darkness itself had come alive, hungry and insatiable. "Matthew!" Jenna's voice cut through the chaos, piercing the fog of his dread. "Over there." She pointed toward a narrow opening on the left side of the corridor, a glimpse of muted light pushing back the gloom. It was their only option, flickering like a promise against the encroaching terror. They veered into the small room, a forgotten office filled with tarnished desks and strewn papers. Dust motes danced in the dim beams of their flashlights, a haunting reminder of what once was. Old cabinets lined the walls, but it was the window that drew Matthew's gaze. The glass, clouded and smeared, held the promise of escape, but the howl of the shadows chased them, relentless. "Can we get out?" Jenna whispered urgently, eyes darting around as if the walls themselves were closing in. Matthew looked at the window. It was stained with grime, but he could see the silhouette of trees, still swaying in time with the wind. "We'll have to break it," he replied, his voice low but steady. "It's our only chance." "Are you sure?" He didn't have to think. "We have to try. I won't leave without you." The resolve in his voice ignited a flicker of hope in her eyes. They both turned to the window, bracing themselves for a leap into the unknown. Before they could move, an overwhelming force suddenly roared behind them, a scream of darkness tearing through the air. The shadows converged, swirling at their feet, clawing for them as though they were alive, sucking the last remnants of light from the room. "Now!" Matthew shouted. He slammed his fist against the glass, smashing it with a desperate crack. Jenna followed his lead, her hands pounding against the frame, heart racing. Push. The window crumbled outward, and a chilling wind rushed in, howling like a banshee. Matthew climbed up onto the ledge, urging Jenna to follow. Just as she was about to climb, a shadow lunged forward, a monstrous figure that took shape, grotesque and dark, its eyes glowing with malice. "Jenna!" Matthew cried, his heart sinking as he felt the pull of dread, threatening to rip him apart. "Go! Now!" With one final desperate glance back, he pushed Jenna out into the night. She hit the ground, rolling away just as the shadow lunged for her, barely missing its target. "Get up!" Matthew barked, his voice filled with urgency, as he squeezed his body through the shattered window. They landed hard on the damp earth, but there was no time to wince. They scrambled to their feet, wild with panic, the laughter echoing like a demonic chant behind them. "Where is she?" Jenna gasped, scanning the darkness beyond the cabin. The growls were now mixed with a whisper, intertwining hate, beckoning them back. What about Sarah? A choice loomed ahead. They could flee into the forest, safe but alone, or return to the cabin and confront the black heart of their nightmare. The stench of dread hung in the air, twisting around them like a noose. The dark shape wavered at the edge of the darkness, waiting, hungry. "Matthew, we can't leave her!" Jenna cried, desperation tightening her grip on his arm. That he looked back toward the cabin, the doors still closed, shadows swirling around it like a fog. "You have to trust me," he yelled, wrestling with indecision. In that moment, time stretched impossibly, teetering between fight or flight. "Trust you?" she repeated, her eyes sparkling with fear. "You can't be serious." But there was only one way to find out. As the shadows whispered and crawled closer, Matthew made the choice that could save them all, or cost them their lives. With a pulse of adrenaline coursing through him, he took a step toward the cabin, Jenna at his side. As the shadows coiled around them, their forms shifting and writhing, Matthew felt the weight of his decision heavy on his heart. Was he leading them to rescue or doom? "Simon," he urged, a bitter knot forming in his throat as they approached the door that held unknown horrors. And just as they gripped the handle, a voice, soft yet piercing, drifted on the wind. "Help me. Would Sarah be their salvation, or the very trap they feared?" The door creaked ominously as they gripped the handle, the sound slicing through the thick tension like a knife. Matthew's mind raced. The whisper calling for help was relentless, but was it real? Could he trust it? "Jenna, are you ready?" he asked, eyes darting to the swirling shadows behind them. They seemed to pulsate with malicious intent, swarming closer. "I don't know," she breathed, her voice quaking. It was a raw panic that gripped both their hearts, and yet, despite the doubt, there was an undeniable pull towards the cabin, the source of Sarah's cries. "On three," Matthew said, his voice unwavering despite the chaos brewing inside him. 1, 2, 3. With a firm twist, the door swung open, revealing a darkened interior that swallowed the faint light from outside. The air inside was stale, heavy with neglect and something else, a sinister presence that scrabbled at the edges of their consciousness. "Go!" Matthew urged, stepping into the shadow-laden threshold. Jenna followed, her flashlight beam cutting through the darkness like a sword. But it only illuminated fragments: a shattered table, strewn chairs, and torn wallpaper peeling back like layers of skin. "Sarah!" Jenna's voice broke through the thick air, desperation tinging her words. It echoed back, swallowed by an unsettling silence. "Do you hear that?" Matthew whispered, straining to listen. The soft undertones of Sarah's voice tugged at him, but they twisted, mixed with the unsettling laughter still lingering outside. Was it a trick? "Matthew, we need to find her," Jenna insisted, her grip tightening on his arm. He nodded, but fear coiled around his heart. "We have to be careful. Stay close." They navigated through the cramped halls of the cabin, shadows flickering along the walls. Each corner turn brought a chill that crept under their skin, pulling them deeper into the nightmare. The laughter outside faded, replaced by an eerie silence that heightened their anxiety. As they approached a door at the back, Matthew felt a jolt of dread. It was ajar, just like Sarah had left it. This was her room, he murmured, pushing the door slightly. Sarah? Jenna called again, panic creeping back into her voice. The moonlight spilled through the narrow window, casting pale light into the room, revealing nothing but shadows and stillness. The bed was unmade, the sheets twisted as if someone had struggled to escape. And there beneath the window, something glinted on the floor. Matthew knelt, picking up a broken locket. His breath hitched. This is Sarah. A sudden cold prickle slipped down his spine, realizing they were too late. Where the hell is she? Jenna whispered, stepping closer to him, her eyes wide with terror. Then they heard a noise, faint but clear. From outside the cabin, a scream echoed, piercing and filled with anguish. It sounded like Sarah. Jenna, we need to go now. Before they could turn, the door slammed shut with a deafening bang, sealing them in. Shadows morphed around the room, their edges curling like smoke. No. This can't be happening. Jenna gasped, pounding against the door. Let us out. Matthew's heart raced as cold tendrils of shadow crept toward them, whispering promises of despair. Fear washed over him, and somewhere deep within, he felt the weight of the choice they had made. The door was their only hope of escape. Break it down. He yelled, rushing to help Jenna. They kicked and pushed against the heavy wood, the laughter rekindling outside. It felt like malevolent eyes were watching them, waiting for the moment they would give in. With every strike, rage fueled their desperation. We won't give up. Matthew shouted. The shadows screeched in response, a cacophony of anger filling the air, drowning out their resolve. Just as he felt their strength wane, a nearby corner of the room began to shift. A trapdoor slowly creaked open, revealing darkness below. Matthew, what is that? Jenna stammered, her eyes darting between him and the dark abyss. It might be our only chance, but before he could finish his thought, another voice filled the air, rising above the chaos. Help me, Matthew. I'm down here. And this time, he knew. It wasn't Sarah, it was something worse. Something, or someone, was waiting for them in that darkness. Was it their salvation or their final doomed descent? Matthew. Jenna's voice trembled, breaking the silence that draped over them like a heavy blanket. She stepped back, instinctively distancing herself from the trapdoor, eyes wide with terror. What do we do? She whispered, heart pounding loudly in her chest. Matthew could feel his own heart racing, every beat echoing against the confinements of his rib cage. He took a steadying breath, glancing back at the trapdoor, then at Jenna, who was visibly shaking. We have to find out, he replied, forcing resolve into his words. It might be Sarah, or it could lead us to whatever took her. He reached for the flashlight, directing its beam back towards the opening. Shadows licked the edges of the trapdoor's entrance, whispering promises of secrets unfurling beneath their feet. Matthew. Jenna looked into his eyes, searching for a hint of the confidence he desperately tried to project. What if it isn't? What if it's another trick? That question pierced him, a stark reminder of their precarious situation. If we don't act, we might lose her, or worse. We can't let fear paralyze us. As he spoke, he felt the weight of dread settle heavier upon him. Fine. Just promise me we stay together, Jenna said, her voice faltering but firm. Always. Gripping her hand tightly, Matthew looked down into the pitch blackness below. The voice called again, more strained this time. Help me. He took a deep breath as he glanced back at Jenna, determination overriding their fear. On 3. 1, 2, 3. With a swift motion, Matthew clambered down into the dark, using the wall for support as he descended into uncertainty. The air was musty and cold, wrapping around them like an unwelcome embrace. He felt Jenna's hand in his, her grip tight and steady, a tether to his resolve. When they reached the bottom, the darkness enveloped them completely. Matthew flicked on the flashlight, its beam slicing through the black, revealing rough stone walls and an earthen floor blanketed in dust. "Where are we?" Jenna whispered, her voice barely breaking the heavy silence, eyes scanning their surroundings. The air was colder here, a stark contrast to the rising warmth of adrenaline in their veins. "Just stay close." "I'll find her," Matthew urged, turning to get a better view of the room. The faint sound of rustling drifted from further ahead, a betrayal of stillness that made his stomach drop. As they moved forward, each step felt heavier, weighed down by a creeping dread. Whispers filled the space, disjointed and slithering, echoing the chilling promises of the shadows above. "Matthew!" A soft cry suddenly pierced through. They both froze. The voice was unmistakable Sarah's. It drifted through the murky air, guiding them deeper into the gloom. "Sarah?" Matthew called, voice shaking as urgency spurred him on. "Where are you? Keep going, please, I need you." Her voice trembled, laced with fear. They rounded a corner and stumbled into another chamber. It was larger, but just as foreboding. In the center lay a large, ancient chest, carved with cryptic symbols Matthew didn't understand. The whispers grew louder, swirling around them, laced with warning. "Matthew, something feels off," Jenna said, her breath coming quick as she stared at the chest. "We shouldn't be here. Just hold on." "I need to see what's inside," he replied, fighting against a rising sense of dread. He moved towards the chest, then hesitated. What if it wasn't Sarah they were uncovering? "Help me. Please." Sarah's desperate plea echoed from within, more urgent than before. Without thinking, Matthew steadied his hands on the chest's lid, feeling the pulse of fear revving through him. "Okay, on 3 again." 1, 2, but before he could say 3, the chest suddenly creaked open on its own with an ear-splitting groan, revealing darkness that seemed to breathe, exhaling the stench of stale air and secrets long buried. Jenna gasped. "Matthew, I don't think we should," but it was too late. From the abyss of the chest, a pale hand shot out, grasping for him. "Help me. It's taking me." He felt the grip of terror ice over his veins. It was neither Sarah's voice nor the shadows he feared. The truth lay somewhere within. He stood rooted, sweat forming at his brow as he fought against the shadows tightening around him. "Choose wisely, Matthew," a voice hissed from the void, dripping with malice. "Or you'll lose everything." What choice awaited him now? And at what cost? The darkness loomed ominously, demanding he decide between despair and hope, between pulling Sarah from that cursed chest or sealing their fates in the shadows forever. What would he choose? Matthew's heart thundered in his chest, the chaos swirling around him like a tempest. Shadows danced, weaving their dark tapestry, a sinister reminder of all that was at stake. He stared at the hand emerging from the chest, pale and trembling, reaching for him desperately. "Sarah!" he shouted, adrenaline surging. "I'm here." But even as he called her name, something twisted deep within him. That voice, it wasn't just Sarah's. It had a hunger, a malevolence that coursed through every syllable. He could feel it, the weight of that unseen truth hovering just out of reach. "No!" Jenna cried, her voice cracking. "Don't get too close." He hesitated. The shadows crawled, whispering doubts and fears, trying to suffocate his resolve. "But what if it is Sarah?" he argued, turning to Jenna. The hope in his heart wrestled against the nightmare unfolding. "We have to save her." "Or what if it's a trap?" Jenna insisted, her voice quaking. "Please, we can't risk it." Each breath felt torn, each heartbeat pulsated with the weight of choice. "If we don't help her, she could disappear forever." He turned back to the chest. "Sarah!" The grip of the pale hand tightened around the edge, as if sensing his indecision. Then, he stumbled back, nearly tripping over his own feet as a vision surged to the forefront of his mind, flashes of laughter, darkness, and light blending together. "It's too late for me." Sarah's voice echoed again, choked by despair. "Matthew, stop!" Jenna urged, pulling at his arm, her eyes wide as terror won over hope. "You have to listen." But the turmoil in him ignited into action. "I can't abandon her." With one swift motion, he stepped forward, ignoring the shadows that wriggled around his ankles, pulling him down. He reached for the outstretched hand. The moment their fingers touched, an electric shock surged through him, igniting a torrent of emotions: fear, love, guilt, desperation. A scream split the air, a high-pitched shriek shaking the very foundation of the chamber. The figure erupted from within the shadows of the chest. It wasn't just Sarah, it was a cacophony of all things lost, manifested as a horrific amalgam of human shapes twisted together in a grotesque display of anguish. Each face was familiar yet warped, filled with the torment of those who had been consumed before. "Matthew! Run!" Jenna shouted, her voice piercing through the chaos, but it was too late. The dark figures lunged for him, their cries filled with torment. "Join us! Stay with us!" They shrieked, their voices like knives slicing through his very essence. That he turned to flee, but a chain of shadows wrapped around him, anchoring him in place. Panic flooded his veins. What was happening? These were the people he had come here with, now lost to a darkness deeper than he could comprehend. He was trapped, just like them, caught in the gravity of despair. "No!" he screamed, as waves of anger and grief washed over him. "I want to let you take me." And just like that, a flicker of something determination ignited within him, summoning every ounce of strength, he broke free from the shadow's grip. "Jenna! Now!" he shouted, forcing his legs to move despite the chaos. Together, they bolted for the chest, where they knew the key to Sarah's salvation could be hidden. "Well, if it's a trap, then let us spring it," Matthew shouted. Precious seconds felt like hours as they scrambled back toward the chest. The shadows writhed, hissing their displeasure, as if sensing their retreat. Their attacks became frantic, seeking to drown out their resolve with heavy despair. Jenna grabbed Matthew's arm as they reached the chest's edge. "What do we do?" she said, her eyes wide with terror. "Look," he said, pointing to a small latch at the back of the chest. Pale hands still clawed at them, but Matthew felt something shift inside. "We have to open it fully." "Are you crazy?" Jenna cried, glancing back with fear etched on her face. "Trust me. It's our only chance." With a resolute breath, Matthew yanked the latch open, ripping the lid fully back. The moment he did, a flood of light surged from the chest, pouring out like sunlight. Smashing through clouds. "Push!" Matthew yelled, feeling the air change around them, crackling with energy. They shoved against the dark hands clawing at them, the light colliding with the shadows, pushing them back. The shadows writhed, but now they seemed less menacing. The figures recoiled, their cries warping into broken echoes of despair. As the light expanded, Matthew saw a glimmer, a reflection of Sarah nestled within the folds of darkness. "Take my hand," Matthew shouted, hoping against hope. The light shimmered, weaving through the darkness and touching the trapped souls within. An explosion of warmth surged through, igniting every shadow with brilliant radiance. "Sarah!" He reached in, his fingers brushing against the tangled mass of shadow that had stolen her. With all his strength, he pulled against the hopelessness, and suddenly her face. There she was, eyes wide yet filled with a knowing strength. "You have to believe," Sarah shouted amidst the chaos, and with that, the pallor of fear cracked open, revealing radiant hope glimmering behind it. "Together." Matthew breathed, gripping Sarah's hand tightly as Jenna joined in, wrapping both of theirs in hers. The light surged around them, illuminating the abyss with every ounce of belief they had left. "Break free!" they shouted, and in that moment everything erupted. The darkness shattered like glass, the shadows splintered, revealing the truth hidden beneath the cloak of despair. They tumbled forward into white light, collapsing onto solid ground as the remnants of the horrors faded like a nightmare evaporates in the dawn. Matthew gasped, eyes blinking against brightness, realizing they were back in the cabin, sunlight filtering through the windows, unharmed and whole. The air was sweet, devoid of the heaviness that had once consumed them. He looked around. Jenna was beside him, wide-eyed and breathing heavily. Sarah knelt on the floor, tears streaming down her cheeks, a mixture of fear and relief etched on her features. "Is it over?" Jenna asked, voice trembling with disbelief. "It is," Sarah said, hoarse but alive, her eyes meeting Matthew's, filled with gratitude and strength. Relief washed through them. The shadows had been faced, demons confronted. They had made it through the depths of despair and emerged into the light, each bearing their truths. Together, they shared a moment of united healing, bonded forever by their harrowing experience. Each of them carried the weight of unresolved fears, but now it was theirs to conquer, arm in arm. As sunlight streamed in, Matthew knew this chapter was closed, but the journey ahead would be theirs to embrace. "Let us go home," he said finally, and as they left the cabin behind, they took their first steps toward a brighter horizon, knowing that in facing the darkness, they had forged their own light. Remember, you need to subscribe now and be a part of our growing family. This is the moment to show your support. Smash that like button to help us spread these stories. And I want to hear from you. Flood the comments section with your reactions and theories about the ending. Did you see it coming? What do you think happened next? Don't wait even one more second. Share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. Your support matters more than ever.